Welcome back to the Endeavors AI podcast. I'm your host, Collin McKee, founder of Endeavors AI, where we talk about the intersection of artificial intelligence, law, business, and the new economy being built all around it. My guest today is Kevin Mottley, founder of the Mottley Law Firm, boutique catastrophic injury practice in Richmond, Virginia, the kind of firm that spends weeks on a single brain injury case, turning it over from every angle. He's also one of the sharpest people I've talked to in a while when it comes to where AI actually earns its place in the trial practice, not hype, the real world, valuing cases, reading a jury, running a firm. And he's got a story about AI calling a juror's number before she even opened her mouth that I can't wait to get to. But for now, Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So let's start with your path because you didn't start on this side of the courtroom. You came up in defense and big firms and corporations and insurers. So, what made you walk away from that and build your own plaintiff practice?
Sure. Yeah, I was a partner at a AmLaw 100 law firm. I'd been there my entire career at that time, 12 years, 38 years old. And on my 38th birthday, I left that firm and started my firm the next day. So that was my birthday present to myself. That was 17 years ago. And it's been quite an adventure. I like to joke with people that everybody should try it once, starting your own law firm. I did at the big law firm focus a considerable portion of my practice on defending corporate entities against personal injury suits. And these tended to be rather large. That firm represented a couple of railroads. And so due to rate structures and things like that, I was thrown at a younger age into some significant personal injury cases and got in the courtroom, which was even back then starting to get more and more unusual in the world of big law. The other part of my practice was focused on commercial type litigation, business litigation, real estate litigation, fiduciary type litigation, things of that nature. So why did I go into personal injury law? I recall one case in particular, which was a brain injury case that as a defense lawyer, I was reviewing for purposes of an appeal. Another firm had handled the case and it had not gone well for the defendant. There was a significant verdict awarded to the plaintiff. And our firm was retained to handle the appeal of the verdict. So my task as a young associate was to sit in a conference room for a week or two and read the entire trial record. And so I read the record, and it was a brain injury case, and it just was very fascinating to me, very interesting to me. Of course, the case was a significant case, and I thought to myself, I do recall at that time a light bulb going off and I said, if you ever go out on your own, this is the kind of case you should handle. It was just very interesting, and the thought of handling a significant case and making a difference in a person's life, a meaningful difference in their life, really struck a chord with me. And I started to develop over the years kind of an itch that I needed to scratch, which was to start something, to create something. Fundamentally, I'm a creator. I have a background in art. If you walk around my office, you see a few of my things that I've done. And that's something I probably got from my mother. I don't know where she got it from, but one of my daughters has inherited that, and she's really taken that gift and done a lot with it. So I'm fundamentally a creator, and I was never going to be happy until I was creating something.
Yep. You also mentioned in the first call that you wanted to sit first chair on every case and do it your way. Does that kind of tie into your
Yes.
creative bug? So,
Yes.
what did it take to actually get you there to the point where you were, in the driver's seat in the case?
Sure. It took some patience. I mean, I do see stories of young lawyers just charging out of the gate, no experience, getting the case of a lifetime, handling it, going to trial and getting a big verdict. That does happen. I've seen that happen. For me, I'm a little bit more of an observer, to be honest. And I needed that portion of my plaintiff's lawyer career to just soak things in, learn, watch others who are very talented in the space do what they do. I got to work on some cases with folks like that and learn from them. And when the time came, the phone started ringing for me to handle cases, significant cases, and started to get my opportunities to first chair matters, and that's gone very well.
Excellent. So now, as far as caseload, I think you mentioned that you're working on about 6 cases or
We usually have less than 10 of what I call active matters. And I think when you and I last spoke, it was around 6. Since we last spoke, it's now 8, which is good. But we pride ourselves on being the type of firm that can just dive into a case and just own that case. And that's where I think you really get high quality representation for your clients. And I've always been, that's the main goal, is to provide the best legal representation for our clients that we can. There's an inherent tension between the so-called volume practice, retail practice, and the injury space, and that goal of providing excellent work. There's an inherent tension there, and the most excellent lawyer in the world can't do everything. So I've always set out to have a number of cases that are not they're not we're not focused on quantity, we're focused on quality, and to do the best we can with this particular case. And I look at my cases constantly, like my inventory, and I look at each case. I kind of pick it up and turn it over in my brain, and the question I'm asking is how valuable can we make this case? How valuable can we make it? And what is it going to take to do that? It's what Mark Lanier, who I'm a big fan of. I've been to a number of his events. He also has a big law background, which kind of made me gravitate towards him. It's what he calls GPSing the case. What's the destination? And I do that on all my cases religiously. What is this case worth? How do we get there? And so we have the luxury of doing that. In our firm, and the results show we've had some great traction, some great results in the cases that we've been blessed to have. And I came at the plaintiff's practice a little different. I mean, a lot of people come in and they're thrown right into a plaintiff's practice where all it is volume and PI cases. That's not my background. I came from a corporate law firm, AmLaw 100 firm, big law, and so I still had legacy work from those days that was sent to me that paid by the hour. So I had when I started out, my firm revenues were billable by the hour was about 95%, occasional personal injury case 5%. Over the years, that's just kind of gone like this to the point where it's the opposite now. So that gave me a runway and a luxury. I mean, when I started my firm, I had 3 kids under the age of 10. I had a mortgage, I had 2 car payments, and I had a wife who was staying at home with our children. And so I had to pay the bills, and that billable by the hour work that, again, I was blessed to have, really gave me that 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 ability to ramp into the PI space over time.
so having a smaller caseload, more time just gives you more time to really think about the case holistically and, do the very best with it or for it. And I think that was a good segue for when, you brought AI and large language models into the thinking of it. Can you kind of step back? I think you told me a story of a seminar, closed door seminar that you had gone to with a handful of lawyers back in 2023. And what happened in that room that kind of flipped a switch for you?
Sure. So the company that I have used for years for my web marketing and website SEO, that sort of thing, they did a small group seminar for some of their clients on artificial intelligence. And I have to say, even back then, I think that was 2023. So not that long ago. I felt like even then I was late to the party. It seemed like several other lawyers knew so much more about it than I did. And so that was, and now, was I familiar with it? Sure, I was, and had heard about it, and kind of like, okay, yeah, yeah, I'll get to that. That was the first time that I actually sat down and looked at what it could do at that time. And, I learned about some of the different AI providers or services, software packages. I don't even know what you call them, but ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc. And I started to learn about its capabilities. Did the light bulb go off at that moment and I charge out and start making drastic changes? No. I actually started playing around with it more in my personal life at that point. I do recall that that year we were planning to take my youngest daughter to Washington D.C., our nation's capital, on over the holiday, the Christmas New Year's holiday. And so I told my wife, I said, I'm going to use ChatGPT to create an itinerary for us. And she said, no, don't do that. That's crazy. We don't want them to have our personal information. And so I quietly did it. I said, okay, but I then quietly did it. Well, about halfway through the trip, my wife looked at me and said, wow, how did you think of all of how did you find that restaurant? How did you, I mean, we've got such a crisp itinerary here. This is very unlike you. And I had to confess at that point that I ended up using Chat GPT to build the trip. And that was honestly my first experience really seeing what it could do. So over time, I've gradually started to dip my toe in the legal practice to using it. But I tell you what, in the last 6 months, these have really been opened as to what it can do in the law practice. And it's like breathing, really fresh air and, and having tons of energy because it's like, wow, just incredible.
So where did it land first in your practice? Was it, like reviewing cases or case intake, or where did you utilize it?
I think for us, it was, I said earlier, I'm kind of an observer for a while. And that's just my personality. And that's kind of how the firm's experience with AI started. And I think that's a smart thing for anybody watching this who's thinking about starting to have AI come into your operation, whether it's a law firm or something else. Take it easy and test things out and get familiar with it before just diving in the deep end. That's just my advice. A good example of the initial ways we would use it would be to take a first pass at a legal research question, um, to take a first pass at a potential client's matter that comes to us with, let's say, a product liability case. Um, just do a first pass at some simple questions and see what comes back. And then, of course, verify all of that yourself as you would have done in the past with your legal research tools, et cetera, which incidentally are using AI as well. But so, that's kind of how it started with us, was probably in the area of legal research. The other, as the owner of the firm and the CEO of the firm, I'm thinking at least 50% of my time, I'm thinking about working on the business, not necessarily in the operations of the business. And so that's the other area where it immediately and prominently started to take a foothold for me, was helping me do everything from budget to come up with scenarios for the future of my firm, run various scenarios out, financial scenarios, etc. And so those two areas I think are probably where we started using it the most. But that changed when we had a really large case in recent years that we were starting to focus group.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's great advice to have. Just get some reps in, use it, play around with it, see how it works. Like you did, play around with it in your personal life and see what kind of things it could do. And then sometimes when people realize the true value of it is, oh, I can make this apply in personal life. Maybe I could take the same sort of general concepts and apply it to some repetitive stuff that I do in my business world with guardrails on, of course. So here's the story that I did want to get to. You run real focus groups, real people in real rooms, and then you started virtualizing that, taking the cases and triangulating that with AI. If you would share the story of the tractor trailer case, what that was.
Sure. Yeah, that was what I just alluded to actually with, probably one of the first examples of us expanding its use a little bit. So one of the typical types of cases we'll handle here involve commercial motor carriers, tractor trailer cases, for lack of a better word. And we had a significant one in the last couple of years. On all of our cases, we have a habit of focus grouping them. And what we've traditionally done with that is we've actually assembled live folks. We usually have like 3 juries of 7 people, so 21 to 25 people. And we create this big presentation. We have it submitted, read it to these folks, and we hire a company to do this for us. It's not us in house doing it, but we do create the presentation. And then we kind of split up, and I'll watch one jury deliberate while my colleague Ben Kyber here will watch another, and perhaps my paralegal will watch the third, as well as the folks who represent the jury focus group companies. So we've got lots of eyeballs on these 3 different juries. So we've done those types in the past. The other type of focus group we have done in the past is what I refer to as more of a big data type model, where you have a survey presentation that's given to people virtually, and they kind of vote on the case and what they would do. So we've done that traditionally. In a big case, we'll do both. We'll have a live focus groups, maybe multiple ones to test out different things, but we'll also do a big data study where we'll test out various things as well. And I'm a big believer in, I call it triangulating on the value of a case, but I'm a big believer in getting as many perspectives as you can. And so it occurred to me in the middle of one of these big cases that we had more recently in the last couple of years, we'd done all this work on the focus group presentation. The focus group was about to begin. And I told my team, hey, I've got an idea. Let's, sanitize this presentation, get the names out and everything, but let's submit this to I think it was ChatGPT. And we have you know, I guess it's a professional subscription to that. So we got the thing all cleaned up to remove any confidential information, submitted it to ChatGPT, and set it up so that we made ChatGPT look at this from the perspective of a juror or a jury in this particular region of Virginia. And we, asked it what it would do with this case if it were a jury. And we got back a bunch of information. Then the focus group started. While they were reading the submission to the focus group, though, I was reading what ChatGPT was saying about it. And it said something that was interesting. It said your most conservative jurors will want to award between $8 and $9 million on this case. And I thought, well, that's terrific, because that's a nice number for a quote unquote conservative juror. I don't believe it, but okay, that's fine. So we did the focus group, and then it came time for the people to start talking about the case. And there was one lady on the focus group jury that I was watching who was clearly the most conservative juror. She was in a rural area. She homeschools her children. She's a tough lady. She very independent, self-sufficient woman, and strong personality. You can just tell. And the first thing out of her mouth when they went around the table and said, "Okay, well, what does everybody think about this case?" She said, "I was leaning towards $8 to $9 million, the exact number that ChatGPT told me my most conservative jurors would be wanting to award." And I just, at that point, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy!" It just blew my mind. And so we've done that over and over again now with other focus groups. And I would say again, it's just one more piece of data. It's one thing you do have to watch out for are any of these artificial intelligence providers, their algorithms, I guess, spitting out something that you want to hear instead of something that's data driven and grounded in reality. And so my perception is I see more of that on ChatGPT than some others. I think even there you can probably dissuade it from doing that. But you just have, like everything, you have to be cautious, and it's just another data point. I would not make a decision, frankly, on a value of a case based off it. But it always gives you some new information, some new insights, some new ideas. And it is just another data point, which in that case was remarkably accurate. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what do you think about that when it gets the number like almost exactly spot on?
oh, I don't know how it did that. I don't. But I tell you what I'm doing now. I'm going back in time and I'm pulling forward all of my results over the last 17 years. And I have that data. It's the earlier years are a little messier and hard to track down, but I'm tracking down some granular data and putting it in a massive database, and we'll be submitting that to AI and building a more of a scientific way of valuing cases, and based off of my data, and that includes a lot of granular details about cases that kind of pull the levers on valuation. And I'm really excited about that. So that you want to know what I'm working on this week? That's what I'm working on this week.
That's excellent. I think that's a unique case, and it's a very viable one for those that are a little skittish about using AI in active cases. This is a great way because it's safe, right? The case is already done and closed, and you could take former information, throw that into the large language model, and see how it would spit it out in today's comparative cases. It's a smart move. Yeah, I
Yeah,
like it.
yeah. I mean, if you run a law firm like me, a plaintiff's firm, you probably do some version of what I've done, which is you look at your inventory of cases, you come up with what's a worst case scenario, best case scenario. What do you think these cases will likely settle for in between? And you kind of have to, if you're doing budgeting, which you should be doing, you try to make decisions, business decisions based off of those. And I thought I was really good at that. And I told somebody in my firm, "Hey, I'm really good at that." And then I thought to myself, "I'm not so sure I am, and let's test it out." So I put myself to the test, and I found out I'm not that great at predicting things. My my actual results were within the band that I come up with, uh, but I found out that I've got a bias there, and that affects that band. I'm always between the goalposts. I'm always making I'm not always, but on average, I'm making my field goals, but the ball is a little too close to one of the uprights than I prefer on my predictions, and this is gonna help me get better at that.
Yeah, 100%. So, looking to the future of AI, because we kind of touched on this before, there's more and more rules. You have to disclose whether you use AI pretty much in any part of a case. Where do you see, in your experience, the rules heading for trial lawyers when it comes to AI here in the next year or two?
Well, I think you're gonna see certain law schools prohibiting the use of AI. I think you're gonna see that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I have a colleague who's a professor, a classmate of mine who's a professor at a top 10 law school, and we had that conversation recently, and he mentioned that as being an up and coming thing. So I think you're going to start to see that. And I can appreciate that in the academic setting. And we can get into that as to why I appreciate that in a moment. But you know, that's gonna be a change, I think, for youngsters who are going through school. But maybe it won't. Maybe by the time they get there, they'll already have undergraduate experiences where they're dissuaded from using AI or prohibited. I don't know. As far as the way it sits right now in the legal profession and how we practice, obviously we've all read the stories about those lawyers. I think it was in New York who submitted a brief to a federal court that was replete with phantom case citations, or is that the right word? Phantom, it's or ghost. I don't,
Hallucination.
yeah, yeah, just not even real case law, that sort of thing. That obviously that's a no-no, and the rules already provide a remedy for that sort of legal malpractice, frankly, which is just submitting something without checking to make sure it's well grounded in law. But we've seen locally that the judges, for example, here in my local state court, the circuit court of the city of Richmond, they have within the last 6 months entered a standing order that requires you to certify that when you have used AI, and it's a very broad order, It'll be interesting to see how that is actually implemented in practice. I I appreciate that effort, but I think when you see an order like that, kind of the idea behind it that I'm discerning. I don't know why the judges in our local court wrote the order that they wrote in the way that they wrote it. It's very broad. But I imagine that the concern is if you could go behind closed doors and listen in to what their concerns are. I imagine what the concerns are stories like the New York lawyers who had these fake cases that were cited. Another concern is pro se litigants who are probably the worst offenders when it comes to the use of AI and legal submissions. And there's also this tinge of this is perhaps unethical and therefore it's dangerous and bordering on unethical, and therefore if you're doing it you should disclose it. I do have some misgivings about that part of it, if that's part of the analysis. I mean, it's just a tool. The rules already say what you as an attorney are saying when you sign a pleading. You're saying that this is real case law. This is a real citation. This fact that I'm telling you about is not something that AI made up. It's something that I've verified. We're already doing that through the existing rules. But I think that's the danger that the perceived danger that is behind a lot of these orders that you see. Um, the way I look at it though is using AI, using any of these tools as part of an attorney's work product. And if we're going to be required to disclose when we use a certain tool as part of our work product in the creation of things we submit to court, I think judges should be required to do the same thing. I mean, if a judge is using AI, I think they need to certify that in their opinion. So I don't think that's necessary, but if it's required for lawyers, if there's something dirty about this, it should be required for judges too. And I think you may see some movement in that regard. I don't know.
And then another piece of that is your clients. Of course, clients are using it all over the place, and now they're using it. Let's look at both sides. You told me about one client that used it and they found your firm, so that's definitely a positive. And then you've got the client who's throwing everything into ChatGPT, viewing that as an attorney or even like a higher reference point than your services. And that makes things a little bit more difficult. So it's a two-edged sword. But what's your thought on the process of your clients using it as, say, a first step before entering the courtroom or entering your law office? Is that a
Right.
good thing, bad thing?
Yeah, it's really interesting because and I know that I'm not alone in seeing this, but clients and prospective clients are neck deep into AI and using it to find you and to then manage the relationship with you and the communications they're having with you. And I'll take one extreme: the potential client who comes to you, you see their first intake message to your firm and you start reading it. It's very long, it's very detailed, it's very well organized, and it looks just like AI drafted it. That to me is a red flag. It's kind of a red flag that's halfway up. I mean, I appreciate, let's take a medical malpractice case. These are very complex, lots of medical jargon, and the clients can be very sophisticated too. It's not unusual to me that they would feed a scenario through AI and get help selling their case to a potential lawyer, because 95% of med mal potential clients get rejected by most lawyers, and so they're trying to step their game up and articulate their situation better to lawyers. And so I understand that, but that first touch point there and and how much they've used AI is a little bit of a red flag, because it it, it tells you that they are potentially going to manage the relationship with you like that, which to me can become a real problem. you take a person who's on the far extreme there, they submit that sort of thing to your firm. That's their first touch. And then you send them a legal representation agreement. They send that back to you marked up by AI with all sorts of suggestions for how you should change your fee agreement. That's when I usually exit stage left and say, no, thank you. I'm just not going to go there. But even during the relationship, you start, you know, everything that happens, perhaps you start seeing that AI is helping them second guess everything you're doing. And that just becomes an unworkable situation. They're not trusting you to handle their case. They're trusting AI to handle the case. Thankfully, I haven't gotten in that sort of situation yet, but that's what I'm on guard with. That's kind of one extreme. At the other extreme, you have someone who is AI light, and they're not doing that. Most people are kind of somewhere in the middle. Of course, you're telling them things. Of course, they're bouncing it off AI. You know, you have a discussion with them about the value of their case. Of course, they're going to be bouncing that off of AI. That is going to happen, and I think it's unrealistic to think that it won't. So, but it can, in that extreme case, really cause problems with the attorney-client relationship. Moving on to how they find you, that I would say in the last 8 to 12 months for us, say that a growing percentage of the leads that we see here in our firm found us through AI. And so it's so important to have rich content that is organized in a way that increases your chances that AI would recommend your content as the source for a question that it is asked. And we have a way of tracking that here, but we also ask people how they found us. And we have seen a growing tendency of them to trust AI, just like what I mean. Right now, I'm going through a big renovation project on a house that my wife and I just purchased, and and I'm a gardener. That's one of my hobbies, and so I'm starting to wonder, okay, well, what should I be growing? I want to plant like this herb garden, and so I don't have much experience with herbs. So well, what's my first place I stop to find out what are the best herbs to grow around here? How do you do it? How do you do this? Of course, it's AI. I mean, if I type in Google, hey, what are the best herbs in Virginia? Probably the first thing that comes up is a sponsored ad from a local nursery, which I skip over and I ignore. And instead I use the long form answer there at the top in Google that is Gemini. So that's, I think, how people are approaching lawyers as well.
Yep, I would agree. I mean, that's a topic for a whole additional episode. AI visibility. That's something that, until your point, maybe 6 months ago, no one even talked about. But now, to your point, it behooves everyone to start working on that. I mean, I was going to ask one thing that any law firm could start working on today. And I think that would be a good recommendation right there, just to see if how visible your firm is in AI today. And well, if you wanted to give any other takeaway to a firm that's dipping their toe in these new technologies, what's something that a firm should start, say, this week?
Well, look, it's like anything else. Somebody early in my career as a solo lawyer, out on my own, a piece of advice they gave me about various services was to, do your homework, compare services, learn about how different services operate, what their strengths and weaknesses are. There's plenty of ways to research that. Um, so that's point number one. Point number two is, okay, if we get into this service, let's say you sign up for an AI service for your type of law, how do we get out of this? What's the exit strategy? And I don't know that that's as important with these sorts of vendors who are out there, but that is a question. Okay, let's try this particular service out. How do we get out of it if it doesn't work? So I would look at your options. I'm going to the AAJ conference in Chicago next week. I know that there will be a dozen AI vendors there trying to get me to sign up for their service. You can spend a lot of money on this stuff. And I would just encourage you to, you know, be a little bit of an observer, do your research, and just think critically about what these various options that are given to you can do, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then start small. Just don't start throwing money at something. And so that's kind of my advice to someone who may be looking.
Cool. Very sound advice. Well, Kevin Motley, how can we our audience find out more about your firm and what you guys have going on?
Well, we've got a wonderful website, so you can always find us there. You can always, that's, mottleylawfirm.com with two T's. And if you're in the Richmond, Virginia area, stop in and say hello. And if you have a matter that requires the services of a Virginia attorney in a significant injury case, we would love and be honored to be considered for helping you out with that.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll leave all that information in the show notes. And if anyone in the audience is trying to figure out their AI visibility or trying to dip their toe in AI workflows and automation, that's what Endeavors AI does. We like to guide people in a disciplined way into our new AI age. It's not something that we can avoid anymore. It's something we have to grab the reins on, but do it in a responsible manner. With that, Kevin Motley, thank you for your time. This is the Endeavors AI podcast, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you.